tend to run away. Knowing when the battle is too strong for us to fight by ourselves. God, He's going to lead us to different areas in our life where He has equipped us and knows that we can take on what is coming. And then it's going to be moments where He's telling us, okay, I'm not leading you there. And we have to know how to run away from certain things, especially with temptations. And that's why talking about DMs, temptations, now allowing certain things to come into our lives that we know is not good for that particular season of our lives. And today it's a little different. We're going to talk about one of the judges in the book, in the book of Judges, Samson. And with Samson and some of the judges, God was doing great things through them. But at times they had their own ways to get things. They were not always aligning themselves with God, with God's word. God was going to fulfill His promise with them or without them. And with Samson, that was the case. At the end of the story, he delivered his people. Like, at the end of the story, the enemies of God were destroyed. But before we get there, we have to see how Samson, he was always ready to fight. He was always going into something, especially when he married the Philistine, a woman, against his parents' approval, knowing that God told them not to marry out of their culture, not because like, oh, these people are bad. Yes, they were doing wicked things, but he knew that if that happened, that their culture is gonna, is gonna tempt them to live like them, rather than them living amongst the culture and influencing, like how Daniel and the three Hebrew boys have done, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So here we find ourselves, chapter 16, and it says, one day Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. That's the first mistake. He saw it like, it's not like God saying like, hey, like, man, go here. Go here. No, Samson was not running away like how our boy Joseph had done. How we talked about that last week. The people of Gaza were told, Samson is here. So they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They made no more move during the night, saying, at dawn we'll kill him. And with temptation, when you allow your flesh to take over, when you willingly walk into the ring with your flesh, that's the title of our message. Do not walk into the ring with your flesh. You have to, this is your domain. Your flesh, this is your house. Your soul lives inside your body. Is your house, when you're living in your house, does your house take over? Or do you make changes in your house? You paint the walls. You do the dishes. You do all these things. Your house is not moving. Your house is dead. It's not living. Your flesh is dead. Because Jesus died for your flesh. Jesus died for your sins. So when you're living inside your flesh, remember that. Like, man, like, kick up your feet. It's like, man, this is my house. Like, when temptation comes, it's like, hey, I'm gonna check myself, because this temporal body right here, I'm in control of this. God gave me this domain to be in control of it, and He gave us the manuscripts of how to do so. But Samson did not get that message, or at least right now he didn't. But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. Then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate, together with the two posts, and tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. Ooh, okay, Samson, I see you. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson answered her, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied them with them. With man hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the bowstrings as easy as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, "You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." He said, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then, with men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson, "All this time you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into fabric, and tightened it with the pin. Again she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He woke up from his sleep and pulled up the pin in the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when you can't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. And that's what happens with temptation. Like, it keeps on coming. It's like, "Hey, like, tell me more, tell me more." And then we get tired, we get weak. Like, at first it's fun. It's like, man, I'm just gonna play around, you know what I'm saying? Like, alright, I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt, knowing that you're not gonna win. Like, I'm gonna do this. Like, man, this is nothing. And that's what happens, right? And also with Samson, he's not married to this woman, and like, he was always, lusting. Like, his eyes were wandering on other women. And in this situation that I want to get to the youth, you might think that, "Oh man, I got this in control." Like, you'll be in the private room or wherever, and you'll be like, "Hey, like, nothing's gonna happen." Don't fool yourself. Isolation is an invitation for your flesh to take over, for temptation to come in stronger, and you will not be able to stand against it. So my suggestion to you all is to be in public settings where anything can be interrupted. And then when you're married or wherever it might be, like wherever in life, like that's when you're married, you can do things within the marriage covenant, or the temptation can be anything. It can be, "Oh, I don't want to go to this party. I don't want to be hanging out with these friends," and knowing your grounds with that, and not allowing them to say, like, "Hey, let's take one shot. Let's take one drink. Take one puff." Like, no, like you need to be grounded in the word, and you need to know your identity. and you know that your identity is in Christ. You know what I'm saying? Verse 17. So he told her everything. No razor has ever been used on my head, he said, because I have been a Nazarite, dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength will leave me, and I will become as weak as any other man. When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines. Come back once more. He has told me everything. So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. When he was born, the angel told, like, his parents were giving the instructions that Samson was never supposed to cut his hair because his strength from God was in his hair. And I think it's even more than that. It's not that so much that his identity was in his hair, but he was supposed to be, he was chosen by God for something. It could be anything, like even if he didn't have his hair, it could be in his hands, like if God wanted that to be the case. And so when God is calling you to something great, don't let somebody take it away from you. Don't give them the secrets that God has given to you in private. Those moments in your life where you're like, hey, like this is who I am. Don't allow other people, don't allow temptation, don't allow things to come into your life that is gonna take you out of the way of what God is doing in your life. Don't allow that to take the favor and the blessings from you. God is always looking to supply us with the next things. But we can take ourselves to far places and he's still like, hey, I have favor and blessings for you, but I need you to come. Draw nearer, draw closer to me so I can give it to you. I won't give it to you until you're ready for it. Because what I have for you, like, I'm not putting the burden on you, but you don't be putting the burden on yourself if you keep acting the way that you're acting right now. Then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He woke up from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. You see, God left him, and like even with Saul, you can still be connected to the branch. You can still be connected to God, but not bearing fruit. God is saying, like, I still love you, Samson, but you proved to me that you can't handle what I have given you. So I'm gonna use somebody else until you get it together. I'm gonna use somebody else. Like for me, I take it like, I have great pride in that. And like God is calling me to do these videos. God is calling me to a different type of ministry, working in the schools that at first God was working in my life, but I felt I was in Samson, like I was in a lot of their shoes where for me I was like Moses. I didn't want to lead. I didn't want to do anything. But God was leading me on and like, hey, like he put me in different groups where I saw that leadership was creating a table of broken people coming together with the same mindsets. And from that start, I started to lead. And I started to see the benefits of giving back and how I was receiving wisdom as well. And I was eating off of that. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, set him to grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. So this proves that even when you have temptation of whatever it is, that God is always going to be working through you. It's like when you walk into the ring with your flesh, you might get bruised up a little bit, but when you go back to the corner, when you go back to that corner, your father's there giving you advice like, hey man, hit him with that right hook, you know what I'm saying? Jab, jab, boom, weave, weave, like, go to the left, go to the right, and he's telling you how to target your enemy, how to target the situation that you are in. And Samson is getting his hair back because I wonder that in that grinding, when he was in that private setting where he's not by any distraction, God was speaking to him. Samson was speaking to God. He was drawing closer to God, and with that, his hair started to grow. Like he was remembering the enemies and what they took from him, but he was remembering what God had gave him. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to celebrate, saying, our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands. When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, our God has delivered our enemies into our hands. The one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain. While they were in high spirits, they shouted, bring out Samson to entertain us. So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. See, that was their first mistake. Not that, it was, yes, there was attacking Samson, his heart is like, oh man, I want, entertain us. And Samson was like, I'm pretty sure he wasn't like that. But with God, with your with your parent, and somebody's trying to humiliate you, they're like, hold up now, that's my kid. You think you coming at them, but you coming at me. And with God, he's working through Samson, and Samson that has that fire in him. Like, all right, okay, you don't know where my strength actually comes. You know, but you don't know. He said it comes from my hair, but he didn't tell them that his strength came from the true God. They think it's like, oh, it's just the hair. No, man, no, it's more than that. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them. Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me, with one blow, get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. In that part, I believe that Samson, yes, he was doing God's work. God made a promise like, hey, I'm going to destroy these people. But I personally feel that Samson, a part of him wanting to get revenge on the Philistines, was not truly to glorify God, to do it for God's glory, but he wanted to do it for himself. Like, man, they took my eyes. They took my eyes. Like the story that I grew up with Samson, I was like, when I learned about it later, I'm like, man, this dude was always out for himself. God was still working through him, but he was all for himself. Like, my 2 eyes are gone. I want to kill them for my 2 eyes. Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than when he lived. Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah, his father. He had led Israel 20 years. So, in conclusion, do not willingly walk into the ring with your flesh. Like, for me, like, hey, I want to fight on my home in my home ring. Like, if the flesh wants to come, it's like, I'm a come with it. But when you allow yourself to be tempted by different things, when you allow yourself to be weakened and you allow different things to come into your life, especially like how Samson, when you're having a relationship with somebody and like you think it's like, okay, like if the door is closed, nothing's gonna happen. If I go to this house, if I go by myself, nothing's gonna happen. No, don't do that. You're fooling yourself. You are fooling yourself. So, above all, hey, this is your domain. Your flesh is not taking over. Don't let it take over. Put your slides on and fight the good fight. And like Joseph, run. And don't go into the ring willingly with your flesh. As always, this is MJH Motivates. Peace.